and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. It's everything you need just to walk the scene. And if you wanna make it better, you give it to me, I'll grease it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop, don't let the dream drop hop. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, Dasha, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. We've played tag a couple times. I've wanted to get you on here for a while, and we're finally doing it today.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here finally. Thank you so much for having me.
So we swim in some of the same circles. I love your work. I'm hoping that you can just kind of update my audience on a little bit about yourself and what you do and what got you going down the path that you're going down.
Absolutely. So I am a registered dietitian who specializes in gut health for athletes specifically. I went to school to get my degree in nutritional epidemiology, which is basically the science of how diet affects disease. And then since then, I've worked with New York Times selling best authors to kind of help them with the nutrition research. I've published 4 nutrition publications on my own. 2 of them were first author. And I've done a lot of research too on the evolution of nutrition, I would say, and how basically over time we've changed our intake, how that's changed us. And there's a lot that I could go into about like the morphology of our bone structure and how that affected our organs and our stride length, which then, as you guys know, is a huge impact on just your whole systemic system, but also with the foods that they were eating. How did that affect things with the diet? Like, how did our organs evolve to be the way that they are? Anyways, so I've done a lot of research on that. And then as a result, the reason why I did that research was to see basically if we were to create the perfect and ideal diet in terms of like how many polyunsaturated fatty acids do I need compared to monounsaturated fatty acids versus galactose versus glucose versus fructose. Like if you were to say exactly what you needed in a day, what would it be? And how do we store that in our body? How do we metabolize that? Is it stored specifically in our stomachs first and then our butts, or is it something else? And does that have genetic predisposition? So that gives you kind of a background of where my background comes in terms of what I've studied a lot of, and then translated that into gut health and athletes specifically, because I really understand how to optimize the metabolism and how to optimize what we eat in order to get a specific outcome. I've worked a lot with like autoimmune populations and just the immune system in general too, studying the mitochondria and liver, etc. So that kind of brings me to where I am today. Was diagnosed, let's see how many years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago now, with celiac disease. So that kind of started a lot of my gut health fascination and journey personally, which then translated to me being able to provide Corporform. So Corporform is a proprietary diet protocol. I basically combined low FODMAP, low histamine, paleo, AIP, everything, so that like no matter who you are, this was the least inflammatory elimination diet you could start for the most amount of people. As you guys know, elimination diets are not long-term. FODMAP is not long-term. But what I was finding was that even if you weren't reacting to FODMAPs, maybe you reacted to histamines, maybe you don't need that. And so going through Corporform is really, really helpful for my clients to identify their food sensitivity specifically and to liberalize their diet, honestly, as much as possible, because during the time of the elimination, the body can naturally kill off a lot of the pathogens that are in there and the dysbiosis that's in there. So we kind of rebalance the microbiome naturally through the dietary process. We do a lot of lifestyle changes too, to ensure that just your overall health is actually benefiting for your longevity, including journaling. Maybe it's stress meditation, yoga practices, maybe it's walking outside daily, bowel training, which is something that we do. And so there's a lot of things that go into corporate form, but that's just a lot of what we do in order to create the most diverse diet as possible, because as we know, the most diverse diet is going to be the healthiest diet for the microbiome.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because you see so many people get stuck on things like low FODMAPs, for example. You can't do it forever. And you're actually doing more harm than good if you're on it for ages and ages. And so, I mean, there obviously are some things that we should all navigate away from as far as food goes, just anyways, but not these intense, strict diets forever and ever. So I like that you said all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because I always have people in my DMs saying like, oh, well, I don't do FODMAPs. I was like, since when and why? Like, why would you ever long term say, oh, I'm on low FODMAPs? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's so let's kind of dive into this a little bit. So now there is more and more recognition being brought to gut health and how much it affects our whole body. It is like the epicenter of everything, right? And people are now beginning to realize it, but you see so many crazy things out there. I mean, people that are just downing acid reducers and all of and that's like the first thing that they tell people. If you've got a little bit of indigestion and you go into your healthcare provider, they're like, oh, here, have some omeprazole or have some Protonix or have all of these things, right? All these PPIs. But there's kind of I think universally, and this is what I'm excited to hear your opinion on, I feel like a big contributor to a lot of the things that we're dealing with is not even necessarily nutrition. That's a big portion, but also just our lifestyle factors like stress and sleep and all the things that don't have to do with exactly what we put in our mouth.
Yeah, you're exactly right, which is why I created this acronym for anyone who wants to really tackle their gut health. It's SPEED. Okay, so there's 5 different things that will affect your gut. Sleep is number 1 for a reason. Then it's personal stress, things like your emotional state during the day. Then it's going to be your environmental stress. Are you in a really polluted environment? Do you have mold toxicity in your house? How is the water you're drinking? How is the air that you're breathing? Our bodies are 80% water, and we breathe obviously in order to survive. So how's your environment doing? Are you in a really stressed environment like your workplace, and that's causing you to go into a state of stress? Or are you at home relaxing in a hot tub, and that's kind of contributing to a calmer state for your gut? Then we go into exercise. So are you doing super high intensity, or are you doing more restorative practices that are enhancing the blood flow to the gut? And then lastly is the diet. And lastly is the diet, honestly, almost for a reason, because I think so many people jump to their diet to be first, and they're like, well, it has to be what I'm eating. And it's like, no, let's step back and let's understand what's going on really in the other lifestyle things that we need to address before we tackle on to the diet.
I think, and maybe just kind of like you get down these rabbit holes when you start to have issues, right? And I myself started to have some major issues, but my nutrition was on point. And so then it was like, okay, let's take a little reverse here and figure this out. And that was when I was like, okay, my job is killing me. My environment is killing me. My overtraining is killing me. My pedal to the metal mentality is killing me here.
Yeah.
And so that's when I had to literally take a big step back and be like, okay, we're taking a break on all this. We're going to remedy it all right now. And it was really incredible what happened once that happened. It was like a new person showed up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I feel like so many of us need that reset too. So many of us just need to be told, like, you know what, this month, like, I think that's why Whole30 works for a lot of people, is that they just completely change their diet. They embrace almost like this healing process where they're like, yeah, I will feel better after this month. There's no doubt about it. Like, this is so good for me. Right. And so when you kind of envision your healing process, it's going to come a lot faster. I see this a lot too with any sort of more complex conditions where people become, and I guess this is going off into a tangent, but when people become the victim of whatever they're going through, it's like, oh, well, I have SIBO, or it's, oh, well, I have candida, I'm never going to get better, or I have SIBO, it's always going to relapse. So yeah, I'm just stuck with it. I can never get better. And with that attitude, of course, you'll never get better, right? You really have to understand that it's a lifestyle change and there's so many different things to it. And if you can find what your root cause is, what's causing your GI issues, then you can really empower your whole future.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of preface all of what we're about to dive into as far as talking about SIBO and stuff like that with a couple of things, because I think what people need to understand is that the amount of acidity in our gut is very important. And when that begins to be compromised via all of these factors we just talked about, stress directly impacts the amount of stomach acid we are able to make. Like, that's a big, huge thing. And like those other factors you brought up, those are all other parts of it. And when you start to see your digestion fail and you start including all of these other things that you've now pulled in because you're struggling, you're starting to create the improper environment in order for all of the necessary things to happen in your digestion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we kick it off with the SIBO questions?
Okay. So SIBO has become a hot topic. Lots and lots of people are talking about it. I've gotten multiple messages. People are like, do you have any episodes on SIBO? I'm like, no, I need to get one going here. So first of all, what is it? What are some reasons that it can happen? And how can it impact us systemically?
Totally. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's SIBO, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Not to be confused with an up and coming new topic, which is called SIFO, which is small intestinal fungal overgrowth. But SIBO is the bacterial overgrowth of your small intestine. So your small intestine was what comes after the esophagus and then before the large intestine where your colon is and things like that. So when you do a stool test, for example, you're always measuring your stool from the colon. So that's your large intestine. And if you do a breath test, then you're measuring more of the small intestine, which is why in order to diagnose SIBO, you do need to have a breath test done. It cannot be done through a GI map or a stool test. Now, in terms of why is it coming up a lot of times, I think there's a lot of reasons in the fitness world specifically. Meal timing is going to be huge. Chronic dieting, low thyroid function, all of these things are what is causing that SIBO. I see it all the time. People go through periods of constipation and then they get backed up because they've been dieting for so long or they're so stressed. And now the food is sitting there and fermenting in their small intestine and allowing for SIBO to occur. Then they start getting indigestion, gas, bloat. And then there's also the other side too, where maybe they're overeating, right? Because maybe you're just constantly putting food in the system and there's no time for the MMC to work and to clear out the bacteria and to clear out your digestive system to allow for that healing and that restoration to occur in between your meals.
Yeah. So I guess my question with that is that you said a lot of things there that we can all kind of dive into, but there's, so along with the eating timing, we've got people that are crushing food. And then we also have people that don't eat enough. How do you find a balance on that one?
In terms of like healing or what I recommend for people?
What you would typically recommend?
So always you want to be in a state of maintenance, right? That's what the body, it needs a little bit. Or maybe some days you are cycling. I think honestly, cycling would probably be even healthier for your metabolism, like doing highs and lows to keep your body metabolically flexible. Now, does everyone need to do that? No, I think maintenance is enough, or a reverse diet is enough. I think a reverse diet would be beneficial for almost everyone on that spectrum, or in one direction or the other. There's no real like yay or nay about it.
Gotcha. How does low thyroid function affect or relate with SIBO?
Yeah, so your thyroid is responsible for a lot of the muscular contractions that are going on, of course. And and the reason being is because your thyroid is your kind of metabolism. It's your powerhouse of the body. So when that's down regulated, your body's not working as efficiently and effectively. So I commonly see low thyroid with SIBO. Additionally, levothyroxine, there has been studies on that suggesting that perhaps that may contribute separately, independently. So the actual thyroid medications that people are taking, it's really hard to say, and there's not really enough research on it yet. But the reason I say that is just that there have been studies to show that people with hypothyroidism and low thyroid function have increased risk of SIBO.
Do you find that can be a kind of a vicious circle, like one kind of ends up contributing to the other and back and forth, vice versa? Because you see it all the time, autoimmunity, and then struggles with the digestion, or what came first, the chicken or the egg, or the struggles with the digestion and then the autoimmunity?
Right. So first of all, there's hypothyroidism, which is not immune regulated, and that we'll see chronically in the fitness industry because of the low dieting, right? The chronic dieting will suppress your thyroid function, and you will show up on a lab result as being hypothyroid. At that point, your doctor will diagnose you. They'll obviously put you on some prescription drug. Now, little do they know that perhaps all you really needed is some time in a calorie surplus and your body in some support, maybe some adrenal supplements and some support to boost up that function without relying on prescription. Now, there's also the second type, which would be Hashimoto's, and that would be an autoimmune kind of struggle where the body's actually attacking its own thyroid gland, and that it would be something that you would have to really obviously get prescription for and really work on the inflammatory markers for. When it comes to our industry, though, the majority of people are that hypothyroid where it's just from your diet, like it's just from your chronic dieting, and that's what caused your Hashimoto's, that's what caused your slow motility, that's what caused your SIBO, and that's the only thing that you really need to do is to feed up your system over time, go through some antimicrobials, clear it out, and you'll be good to go if you just take some time off.
And I love that you brought all of that up, because I feel like that is something I spend my life saying, working with clients constantly. And I feel like I get, as well as you probably get, the people that it has been a problem for a really long time. And so then it's not an overnight fix. And then the hard part about that is you have these people that are now really wanting quick results because they've been doing crazy things for so long, and it's not an easy thing it's not a quick overnight fix.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on your end of things, when you encounter somebody that has been dealing with these issues, maybe they are a chronic dieter or an over exerciser, where do you start?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think that it'll differ for a lot of people. The reason being is because SIBO oftentimes comes with co-infections. And with that, it means that we need to test the stool for candida, for parasites, for worms, for H. pylori, all of these things. So if someone was like, Dasha, I have all the money to spend, let's get a GI map, let's get the stool test done. And which by the way, so the GI map, if you want to get it covered by insurance, it has to be ordered by a doctor. That means that you have to see a functional doctor, which means that you'll need a $400 initial consult out of pocket to then order it to then go through insurance. So it doesn't make sense to really do that unless you already are working with a functional doctor who can order you one. You'll have to most likely pay out of pocket for the GI map. The GI map itself costs $359. And with that, you'll get your stool test. Now, coinciding with that, I typically will say, look, let's pay for the GI map, but let's get our breath test done through your insurance, through your doctor, because most times they will order that. And especially when you're working with a dietitian, you just drop I'm working with a dietitian and she recommended this. I could always call them, etc. They're more likely to write the script for it, because you do need a lactulose substrate for the actual exam. So anyways, if you can afford to get the GI map, I would get the GI map, go through the breath test. Again, I said the GI map cannot diagnose you with SIBO, but it will check for your co-infections. So I'd recommend getting the GI map and then going through your doctor to get a breath test. From there, then we can really assess, okay, what is going on in the GI otherwise that might be preventing the SIBO from healing, especially if you're getting this relapse. The problem with SIBO is that if you do get diagnosed with it from your doctor, rifaximin is very rarely covered by insurance. And if it is, I've had people get charged $1,800 for one round of antibiotics. It's insane. The amount that, like, honestly, it'll probably cost between $600 to $1,800 for one round of it. I think the percentage, don't quote me on this, is like 57 to 61% will relapse, which means that you'll need a second round of that. So whatever that number is that I just priced you at, you're going to want to double that, because some people need multiple rounds of it to clear it out. However, that doesn't mean that there's not a time and place for it, because if you are in a constant state of inflammation, I would rather you do something that's fast that would eradicate it than like go for 6 weeks, 8 weeks on some sort of treatment protocol that would elongate how much distress your body is under. So there are times and places for it. What else can I say about it?
Well, so now that is an antibiotic protocol. Is there a practice that has to happen post-treatment in order to make sure that you are at the right balance as far as your microbiome goes?
Yeah, totally. So we definitely want to remember that either antibiotics or antimicrobials will kill off good guys and bad guys. So it'll wipe your microbiome completely. It's not going to selectively do whatever, it's going to wipe out everything. So we're going to want to re-inoculate your gut with a lot of good bifidobacteria, lactobacillus bacteria, and really encourage that diversity of your diet. Again, with something like Corbiform, which is why it works so well, is just because by the time we get to that point, you've gone through the elimination stages during that antimicrobial phase to reduce the amount of symptoms and inflammation that you're having. And then by the time we start working out and diversifying the diet, your symptoms are gone and you can really understand your true food sensitivities, because the food sensitivity tests are a waste of money. Food allergy tests, even at the doctor's, waste of money, unfortunately. So yeah.
Can you just dive into that a little bit? Because I get asked this question all the time. I explain it to people why it is a waste of money, and they think that I'm just crazy and they don't listen.
Yeah. Totally. I get asked this all the time too. So food sensitivity tests are inaccurate, completely inaccurate, because our bodies naturally produce an IgG reaction to the food that we're eating. So when you take a food sensitivity test and you're showing up with 50, 60 foods that you're sensitive to, it's, yeah, no, can I swear on here? I don't know, but no shit, like no shit. You're reacting to everything you eat. The reason is because when you're in a state of dysbiosis and when you have intestinal permeability, remember that there are two things that can increase your intestinal permeability in your gut, okay? It's bacteria and it's zonulin, it's gluten. So zonulin is something that zonulin can increase your intestinal permeability. It comes from gluten. The other thing that it can increase your zonulin is bacteria. So bacteria or gluten. If you're in a state of dysbiosis and you have GI symptoms, hello, that's where your bacteria is, and it's going to be causing more intestinal permeability. When you eat any food, that means that it's passing through your gut barrier, has a greater chance. So the food that you are eating will be flowing through the body and cause the immune reaction. So that is why all the foods that you're sensitive to are the ones that you're eating, most likely. Some of them are probably new because, again, it's very difficult to pinpoint the specific proteins and are they related? We don't really know, etc. So IgG test is literally throwing your money into trash. Then we have the IgE panels, which a lot of people too have been promoting as a better alternative. And although I do agree with that, I think there's still a lot of fallacy in the Ige blood panels that you can get from the doctor. And the reason being is because if you've ever gotten an Ige panel for yourself, and I can tell my own story with this, but they're inaccurate. And when you Google it online, you'll see that there is no gold standard for an allergy or sensitivity panel other than going to the doctor, having to eat, let's say you're highly allergic to peanuts, having peanuts in the doctor's office, having an extreme reaction and having them inject you with EpiPen in the office. That is how you diagnose a true allergy. Other than that, no. They can do skin pricks, and that's a really good one too. But again, all of this is done in a doctor's setting in a very controlled environment that you're safe in. The blood tests came back completely wrong for me personally. And then I realized, I was looking at it, I was like, this is BS. Because I recently had to get that done because I had mold toxicity in my apartment. So I was like, I asked my doctor, look, I'm allergic. Like I became inflammatory allergic to, I would get my throat would close. I would get hives from nuts that I was eating. I'd never been allergic to nuts in my life. And I was like, look, can you test me for a mold allergy and for a nuts allergy? And I got my panel back, and she had ordered everything under the moon. To be honest, she was like, she threw in shrimp and shellfish and all the top allergens, dairy. I was like, okay, well, I'm not allergic to dairy because I consume probably a tub of it a day. So I know I'm not reacting to that. And my nuts came back not reacting to nuts. And I was like, I clearly am very allergic to nuts right now. And then my mold was not an allergy. And she was like, it would show up there if it was in your apartment. I was like, lady, I've had diarrhea out of my butt for 8 weeks, and you're trying to tell me that I'm not allergic to it when it's in my system. So I did a mycotox panel too to see if it was in my system, and I had mold in my body. It was confirmed in my apartment, but my allergy test was not showing it. So that's why I'm like, I don't do allergy tests. I don't believe in food sensitivities for even worse reasons. But if we want to truly diagnose an allergy, the best way is to go through something like Core Perform, where we eliminate from the diet for 2 or 3 months. Maybe you go that long. Honestly, we start reintroductions at 2 weeks. But you clear out, basically, you change your microbiome, and then you reintroduce foods. I've had countless amounts of people, once they go through that process. I had someone this weekend just send me a video. I just posted it on Instagram, actually. And it was just eating an apple and remembering the day when previously I couldn't even eat an apple without digestive distress. And so I've had people reintroduce things like apples that they previously couldn't do. One of them was chickpeas, I remember, for one girl. Another one, of course, is gluten and dairy is the most common ones, because those are the first ones that people notice that they're most reactive to. I've had people reintroduce those successfully, be able to tolerate it absolutely fine. And while I'm on the note of that, I do want to say that when you heard me say that gluten can increase the intestinal permeability, please do not eliminate gluten in order to think that that's what's going to resolve your gut issues. That may not happen. So remember that there's a lot of other things that are contributing to this. And again, going gluten-free is not going to resolve and magically heal your gut lining. And just like the other way around, I have many people who come to me with extreme intestinal permeability who I can see on the GI map are not reacting to gluten at all. So it goes both ways. Again, please talk to a professional before trying to incorporate anything into your own practice.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of the questions I hit on, was how you felt about gluten. I mean, obviously you're handling your own personal situation. You have to handle it differently, and everybody has a unique situation. But how do you feel about gluten in general? I know you talked about zonulin and how all this happens. So can you elaborate a little further on that?
So personally, I avoid it. I have celiacs, as I mentioned in the very beginning with my diagnosis, and I do eliminate it as a part of the Core Perform protocol. I do find that it's inflammatory for a lot of people, but more so than anything, I think that it's one of the brat foods. So if you've ever heard of a brat diet, it's like the thing that you get put on at the doctors. They always call it for diarrhea, or if you have a stomach bug, it's bananas, rice, apples, and toast, brat. And so toast, or gluten-free breads, will bind you up. So they'll cause a little bit more or have an increased risk of causing some constipation in the diet. So never do I want people to be relying on toast or breads in their diet, because that might constipate them a little bit. However, I do think that everything is allowed in a diet. I'm very much a preacher of moderation. Do I think that it's something that you should be consuming in large amounts? No. Even in like daily, I probably wouldn't. But once a week, couple times a week, I think that it's fine.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I've always tried to kind of think of when I'm thinking of foods and nutrition and lifestyle factors and all of these things, right? Toxins, there's so many things out there, is we all have this bucket, right? How full is our existing bucket, and what other stuff do we want to contribute to that bucket? So for me personally, I don't feel well when I do gluten at all, and I stay strictly away from it. But like as far as other things go that I eat that maybe shouldn't be eaten, I keep my bucket relatively empty so that I have room for those things later on.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally exactly how I preach it too.
I love that. So I want to just revisit the lactulose breath test a little bit. There are a lot of those out there, I feel like, and I know like a lot of people think they need to go to a practitioner or something to get them done, but then you also see there are a lot of coaches in the industry that are actually quite good at handling digestive dysfunction. And now they have that test available on places like Life Extension. I think Quest might do it too. Are those the same kind of tests that you would get with a practitioner, or are they different?
So they are the same. However, I've been using something even better recently, which you have to be a dietitian or a doctor to order, called the Trio Breath Test. And the reason being is because more recently we found that there are 3 types of SIBO, and the lactulose test can actually miss the 3rd type, which is hydrogen sulfide. So I like to get the Trio Breath test. Additionally, too, sometimes the ones at the doctors that only test hydrogen. I'm not sure if the Life Extension one only tests hydrogen, but there are 3 types of SIBO. So you're going to be misdiagnosing yourself if you don't check all of them. There is hydrogen dominant SIBO, there is methane dominant SIBO, and then there is hydrogen sulfide, or like a mixed probably SIBO.
So can we explain just a little bit how some of these foods contribute to this overgrowth? Because when you get into like low FODMAP and stuff like that, or even like alcohol, I mean, a lot of people have an issue with alcohol. So can you kind of talk about how these contribute and how that kind of plays a role in all of this?
Sure. So alcohol specifically will increase your intestinal permeability. So that is what will cause just more of that reaction and those toxins to be flowing through the system. And a lack of barrier can just cause more infection in the body too, and be an immunosuppressant. But anyway, so enough with alcohol. In terms of the food that you're eating causing SIBO, it has to do with mainly your motility and how quickly it's being digested and outputted out of the system, right? Is it sitting there? Is it properly going through like an acidic environment that will make sure to neutralize any sort of pathogen? Or are you eating like really high fiber foods, causing you to be really gassy, causing you to have slowed motility? And then additionally, I know everyone hates this one, but water intake. Are you drinking enough water to allow for your motility to work properly? Or do you rely on like an osmotic laxative and it's pulling water into the gut and maybe you need even more water, et cetera, et cetera?
I love it. I don't know if you have any knowledge in this area, but I'm just curious. Bariatric surgery clients, that's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And I find that there are more and more people that are getting bariatric surgery, whether it be a band or they're actually getting a gastric bypass. How can they protect their digestion and all of that? Because it seems like you're making a huge GI compromise when you jump into bariatric surgery.
Yeah, for sure. And there's like a very specific, bariatric dietitians are one of the hardest to get hired for because it is very, very complex, the just specific protocols and stuff that you need to be going through to enable someone and help someone with that, especially because they are at such high, like exorbitantly high risk of nutrient deficiencies because of their inability to absorb nutrients, because again, their stomach may be missing, or they got stapled, whatever. The nutrient absorption isn't there, which means that if we're not getting enough B vitamins, B12, iron, those are the main ones, very common to kind of have issues. But with bariatric surgery, the number one thing I can say is make sure that they're getting their vitamins via a liquid source. And then also make sure that they have properly gone through the stages of reintroducing food, to make sure that they're getting first liquid nutrition, then slowly, gradually increasing their intake to maybe pureed food, and then maybe whole foods afterwards. And just remember that they have such slow motility that the liquid nutrition may be what's best for them.
Yeah, because you see that a lot, like where they go through a lot of this stuff initially, but then years and years down the road, they start suffering from all these other things going on. And so I was just curious how you felt about that.
Yeah. I personally don't work with that population because I just have my own niche and that's not what I deal with. But I'm sure they deal with a lot of nutrient deficiencies, SIBO, things like that. Probably very common again because of the motility.
Gotcha. So let's go back to SIBO a little bit. I know I kind of got off on a tangent there, but so if somebody is suspicious that they may have a SIBO infection, they would contact you or another provider that works with this particular thing. But there are a lot of people that have like a financial barrier involved. So then they begin to to look into the low FODMAP diets or the AIP or whatever it may be, right? And then they start I think the first thing that shows up is like all of these processed like foods that are like FODdy foods or things like that. So where should somebody go if they have a suspicion? Say they need to start at the bottom, but they don't necessarily have all the tools they need for their toolkit. Where would be the first thing you would suggest?
In terms of where to start?
Yeah.
I actually have a webinar on this. So if anyone's interested, you can always just DM me at Dasha Fitness, because I have a webinar that goes over for free, by the way, for everyone, that goes over like your options and how do you deal with your doctor versus when you know that it's going to actually be cheaper for you to order this SIBO test yourself, like on Life Extensions, and like when to do that. So feel free to DM me, but it really depends on the person and their case, for me to recommend what's going to be cheaper for you in the long run, and a lot of the symptoms too. Because if you're someone who's like, I'm pooping blood, all right, that's going to be completely different than someone who's like, oh, I have some bloat and gas, and it's like, okay, well, what have you done about it? Maybe it's something as simple, honestly, as coaching, and at least for coaching for a month, then you can go through that proper elimination diet. You can see if it's something deeper and you'll know, okay, do I need to order a GI map? Or you could just be like, you know what, maybe I'll start with a GI map and I'll go through antimicrobials. The thing with that is that not everyone needs that. Like not everyone needs that. I have so many people who get over whatever infection that they have just by going through core perform, because again, we change the microbiome, we eliminate all the triggers, we lower the inflammation naturally with food and exercise and lifestyle changes versus taking a pill. And I think because people are so convinced that they need to take a pill this day and age because it's fast and it's going to work and they need a lab test to confirm it and visually see it, they're quick to do the testing. And that's fine. Honestly, I think there's so many people who benefit from testing because it keeps them adherent to their protocol. If we were kind of blindly guessing and we had no idea what was going on, it's going to be a lot harder to get a client to stay compliant with whatever you're telling them to do if there's no visual confirmation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any like key symptoms or things that people could Yeah, I know there's so many digestive symptoms for all sorts of things. So this is a hard question to ask, but are there any key symptoms or things to look out for that could make one be concerned that they may be struggling with a case of SIBO?
Yeah, and I have a class on this too, about like 101 bloating and constipation. If you're a coach or if you're dealing with bloat and constipation, if anything, this is I'll give you guys it for like $75. It was a $150 course that I had recorded, but it goes all into like what is normal bloat, what is normal, what is considered normal pooping, and what is constipation. How do I get over the bloat? When do I know if the bloat is something that I need to go to my doctor for, and what are my options there for? So I go through our 5-page constipation protocol. And so if you're able to go through the phase 1, 2, and you're maybe now relying, which by the way, phase 1 would be things just like your lifestyle changes, your diet changes that we talk about. Phase 2 would be supplements that can help with your constipation or your bloat. And then phase 3 would be like quick fixes that, yeah, it's going to help you if you've been constipated for a week and you really need to go, but it's not a long-term strategy. So it kind of walks you through those processes, what herbs that we use for each of them. And one of them, for example, which you had mentioned earlier that I'm now remembering and never touched on, was like the promotility agents. I usually don't use those in practice. Again, in that class, you'll be able to learn all about it, but I use foods. I use natural things like ginger, kiwis, prunes. There's so many out there that you can use to help create that same effect versus relying on a MMC motility drug. The reason being is the one that are most commonly used are so underdosed that they're not doing anything. I think they put like 50 milligrams of ginger and the efficacious dose is like 1 to 2 grams. So you're not even close, honey. So that's why I don't use a lot of motility agents. I focus more on the lifestyle practices, getting to that root cause. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you feel like, I know this sounds funny, but do you feel like when somebody sends you pictures, you're kind of able to identify what SIBO looks like before any, like based on symptoms and the way people look in general?
I mean, sometimes I have some patients who come to me with like very bad distension. So yeah.
I know when I had it, I was prepping for lots of bodybuilding shows and stuff, and it was crazy because I had a shredded 6-pack and I looked like I was 9 months pregnant. It was everything I could do to suck my gut in. It was absolutely horrific. So yeah, I think about that and I can see that, like, it seems to be like that lower inflammation. Anyhow, so I was just curious because sometimes I look at people and I'm like, do you walk through the grocery store and you're like, oh boy, that person's probably got some horrible GI problems going on.
Honestly, I've been looking into this recently more and more. And I think that there's so many other root causes if you're looking at a general population, because even like something like cirrhosis, which is a liver disease, like that looks like SIBO, right? Cirrhosis looks like it. If you have like endometriosis and you have maybe cysts or polyps that are coming up, that can cause the same bloating look that a SIBO would. So getting that those two checked out, getting a colonoscopy, things like that. Then there's also things like maybe a herniation or something that's actually like twisting up your stomach in a weird way that's causing gas to be trapped somewhere that can cause a SIBO kind of a look in the GI. So there are a lot of things that can be going on. I think that the industry just, again, we preach what we see on the internet here, and we kind of forget that there's other things too.
True, very true. I know that you do see a lot of people though they're like, I need to lose all this stomach fat, and it's usually there's a lot more inflammatory stuff happening than the actual stomach fat. So
Oh yeah, I've had one girl lose 10 pounds in a week. 10
yeah,
pounds in a week. We didn't change her macros, we didn't change her calories, just pure inflammation from starting protocol, from starting like less inflammatory foods for her body. It was insane.
absolutely. And I think that's a common thing, right? Or somebody will go out and somehow they'll end up with a ton of inflammation and they're able to get it back under control and they lose the weight again. But the scale really messes with their head because they're like, oh my gosh, I just gained 10 pounds. I'm like, well, you didn't eat that many calories. I wouldn't be worried about it, you know?
Yeah, and that happens too when you start treatment for SIBO, is that you get more bloated and you hold water because you're in a state of stress. Because remember that antimicrobials, and when you're killing off the good and the bad bugs, that is a state of huge stress on the body, which is why you feel fatigued, why you feel tired, why you might have brain fog. That's why you're holding more water during that time. You're going to gain weight. It's not fat, it's or muscle, it is just water.
Absolutely. So let's talk about artificial sweeteners, because that's something I wanted to ask you about. I know a lot of people are in the belief that they are tough on the digestive tract. Other people say they're not. I mean, granted, we are all an individual population, but what would be the general rule of thumb?
I like to stay away from artificial sweeteners when going through a gut healing protocol. I'm okay with stevia. There are some studies that say that it has antimicrobial effects. However, I think that ultimately the real purpose of this study is just showing that everything we eat affects our microbiota. It doesn't matter if it's asparagus versus broccoli, both of them will modulate our gut differently. And so just being aware of that is going to be the first step. Like everything you put in your body, coffee versus tea, going to modulate the gut differently. Broccoli versus asparagus, like I just said, apples versus bananas, they're all going to do different things on the body, whether or not that they're quote unquote healthy or not. So we don't really know what's healthy and what's not, because there's no such thing as a healthy microbiome right now. The only definition of a healthy gut is just the most diversity in the gut. So that's the only thing. We don't know what types of bacteria, the amounts of that. So we can't really extrapolate any of these data that we're getting into healthy and not healthy to a degree. Because we do know that some strains are healthier than others because they're responsible for example, producing short chain fatty acids, which have great benefits for the gut, etc. But anyways, so when it comes to artificial sweeteners, we don't know. We don't know. However, right, I'm very much under just, it's kind of like if someone told you to drink food coloring like red 40 every day and try and justify you eating that every day, like, am I gonna be here and tell you like strictly yes, that will cause you cancer? Like, no, I can't say that. But like, would I recommend it? Like, really no, like really no. Like I would just like, that's how I feel about artificial sweeteners. It's like, it's one of those things like, can you have it once a week? Yeah, maybe. That's fine. But is that going to be beneficial for you long term? I wouldn't do it every day. That's for sure.
Yeah, you just see so much of that, especially in the fitness industry. It's like, it's in everything. It's in pre-workout, it's in protein, it's in BCAAs, and these people are taking these huge stacks of these supplements that are just full of this stuff, and then they're wondering why they have digestive distress.
Well, that's literally exactly why I created Core Perform Protein, which I think honestly your audience might be the only one to know this, but by the time this launches, we'll have pre-sale open. But I had that same exact problem. Everyone came to me, they were like, Dasha, whey upsets my stomach. Plant protein sucks because it's inefficient. I have to take double the scoops and it tastes like crap. Like I have no solution. And the thing that people don't know about plant proteins is a lot of them are filled with heavy metals, and brands like First Form, Bomar, Redcon, we saw like all these brands are getting lawsuits because they're just not having quality products on the market. I know First Form specifically, for example, Legion was another one, but they both had high heavy metals amounts in their supplements. And the reason is totally natural. Okay. So plants hyperaccumulate heavy metals in their leaves as a natural defense mechanism. And the problem is that when we condense that all into a supplemental form, now we're consuming higher amounts of that than a whey, for example. Now, the problem with the whey is that the virome of the cow, of the where the whey was taken, will affect your own bacteria in your gut. So the quality and the source of that cow is super important. That's why like really cheap, like Body Fortress will bloat you like crazy, and versus a really clean grass-fed, etc., like super expensive, probably won't. Now there are other reasons too, like xanthan gum that's commonly added, artificial sweeteners that's commonly added. Those things in these supplements will affect your GI. And so when I had this problem, I was like, okay, we need a solution on this market. So what I did was I optimized the amino acid profile in a plant source. Now, plant sources are actually better for the gut than animal sources. This has been studied and validated due to, again, the bacteria that are actually eating each amino acid strand and digesting it. So plant sources are better. We know this. We know that we need to double the amount in order to get enough leucine, EAAs in it in order to stimulate the muscle. So what I did was I optimized it. So it has a PDCAS of 1. It's just as effective as whey. So you get actually more protein and in less calories with this. It's a plant-based and it has no gums, no artificial anything. It'll be so easy to digest. And it's one of those things that I personally, as in being in bodybuilding and being an athlete, where like I admit, like I eat protein powder probably daily. And so having like like you're raising your hand too, like, it tastes really good, but does it screw me up? Yeah, like sometimes it does. And unfortunately the industry made me sick. And so I saw all these people coming to me from, I was taking this greens powder and I started feeling like, and I'm like, look, all these supplements you're taking are causing you to be sick. And the fact that no one has a solution in a company that's devoted to creating digestible nutrition is beyond me. So that's why I created Core Perform. So if you guys are listening, this protein is live. There are 2 incredible flavors and I cannot wait for you guys to see them because they're from the bodybuilding world. And so you'll know once you see it.
That's really good. And I'm glad you brought up greens powders too, because that's another one that drives me crazy. You see these people just pounding these greens powders and I'm like, heavy metal. That's all the little alarm with the red bells is going off in my head because I'm thinking, you guys, this is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things wrong with greens powders too. I have so many reels on it. I have a blog post on it too. If I'm mentioning any of these things that you guys want to read, by the way, just shoot me a DM at Dasha Fitness. I'll give you the links for them. But I have a full blog post going through my studies at Tufts. My mentor and one of my co-chairs on my thesis was a professor at Harvard in biochemistry. And he and I sat down and we made a list of the 7 reasons why greens powders won't work. And so it goes through all the digestive processes that it just wouldn't make sense, that we don't have at least the knowledge or the research to support them. Goes through the acid changes, the basic changes, the receptors that are necessary. So I can send you guys that blog post too. And then I've also talked with people, actually, funny enough, I have his business card right here, but his name is Jim Flatt and he works for Bright Seed, and it is a company that takes the extracts of everything that we know and puts them into a database of the foods that we're eating. So they try and then use that database to build out studies or build out compounds. So he's the one, for example, that would be processing like, okay, if we took turmeric, what exactly in turmeric is the beneficial quality, right? We know it's curcumin. So that's what their company is doing, is extracting all of these. And so when I talked to him, I was like, so what do you think about greens powders? He was like, they're trash. Like we literally have no evidence to support that we could even process that and we could have a beneficial effect on the body. And he knows this because he analyzes this on a daily basis of all the foods and vegetables that he processes for his data. So yeah.
All super interesting. So let me ask you this, because I've said it on the podcast before, and now I'm curious to hear your opinion. So I try to keep, micronutrient diversity a thing in my diet. I am not a huge lover of diversity as far as my food goes, though, because I love to just be basic. So I have been known to go to the grocery store and just pick up like I try to buy organic when possible, but pick up a ton of different diverse vegetables and fruits. and I literally blend them all together and put them in an ice cube tray. And I will just eat a couple of those a day. And then I don't really mess with anything else after that.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great way of doing it.
I
I'm gonna
mean,
steal that.
you should totally steal it. Okay, yay, I get your stamp of approval. I'm excited because it is
The only
nasty.
the only thing I will say is try and cook them before you do it.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
So steaming or cooking, mainly steaming, will help to actually allow for the nutrients to become more bioavailable, because we have a harder time to digest and absorb those nutrients if the food is in the raw form. So I always suggest cooking or steaming your veggies before consuming it. And that's why I will put my foot down if anyone wants. I don't discriminate against diets except for the raw vegan diet. That is the worst diet you can possibly ever consume.
I would agree with that. It's really good to know that, though. My husband's going to kill me. He's going to be like, what are you doing right now? You are steaming a whole bunch of stuff. What are you doing? And I'm going to be like, oh, I'm just making my little ice cubes now. We're cooking them instead. But it's great because you can freeze them, put them right in the freezer, and they're available. And you're able to just pick up a couple extra nutrients without having to eat maybe the veggies that you wouldn't normally eat.
I absolutely love that. That's brilliant.
Sweet. I win. Cool. I like it. Well, if there's anything else there that you could get out to the listeners today, what would it be?
Go buy Core Perform, guys. It's amazing. And the first 200 people who purchase will not only get free shipping, but I'm going to be starting up like Core Labs. So everyone who applies and like gets the survey done, like I want you guys to be the ones who are choosing the next flavors, who are taste testing, who are whatever. Like I want this to be like our bodybuilding community, our fitness community, the people who are using this. What do you guys want next? And so we're opening up Core Labs with that, with the first 200 orders. So I'm so excited to share it with you guys and hear what you think.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good thing. I know it's so hard, especially as a coach, because everybody has these diverse needs, but protein is just a really hard one. I hate the vegan proteins, way upsets people's stomachs. It's just always in this. And I find like I'll do great on one particular one for a great time. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, no, can't have it. Okay, what's next? So
yeah,
it's
the
all
healthy
really good
ones
to know.
taste like crap, I found.
Yeah. Yep.
This one tastes so good. I could bathe in it.
Okay, well, perfect. Sign me up. If people want to find you, look into using you for their services or, services or anything like that, like how do they do that?
So you can go to coreperform.com and that'll have both of our coaching on it. It'll have the proteins to purchase on it, and everything. So you can go there, or you can always just find me on DM at Dasha Fitness.
All right. Well, you're so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing some time with me and my listeners today. And I'm super excited to get this episode out there.
Thank you. Me too. I can't wait. Thanks for having me.